Okay. Hello, my name is Lillian. I have grown up in the United States, in Kosovo, in Slovakia. I studied for 4 years in Florence, Italy, where I have a Bachelor's of Science in Art Conservation and Restoration. And for the past 3 years, I've been working in Bosnia and Herzegovina on 3 projects that have been designed to assist the country address the remnants of war after the aftermath of the war in the early 1990s. This is the current map of Bosnia. It was designed and drawn up in 1995 after the war ended. And as you can see, it remains divided. Our ability to relate to one another is very, very important. And when we don't, and when we forget this, we end up with maps like you just saw, maps like Bosnia. There are many consequences that follow the end of conflict. Damage and destruction of property, victims, intolerance and separation, and damage to cultural and ethnic identity. But I work primarily with only one of these, and these are military remnants of war. There are over 750,000 illicit weapons in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Landmine victims, small arms and light weapon victims are still occurring today. There have been over 1,200 landmine victims since the end of the war, over 500 which have died. There's over 1,200 square kilometers of land that is still mine suspected 20 years after the war. And there's over 6,000 tons of military ammunition surpluses in Bosnia and Herzegovina. But these are not the only remnants of war. As I mentioned, veterans and victims, damage to private and public property and belongings, and the destruction of cultural heritage and symbols of identity. These are some of the consequences of war, and they all threaten a people and a country's ability to reconcile and cooperate after war's end. Remnants of war in its many forms, no matter how diverse or how different, require complex solutions. There's no one-size-fits-all to these problems. But what I believe and what I see every day in 3 years working in Bosnia is that there's something missing in the conversation that is addressing these problems, and that is culture. Cultural activities and heritage must be given a leading role in addressing these issues in order for reconciliation and development to really, truly begin. But frequently, we don't understand this, and we don't understand how to do this because we don't really know what culture means. Culture is our art, our music, our theater, our literature. It's also our architecture, but it's also not just these tangible ideas, but there are a lot of the things that we don't really know how to define, such as customs and traditions, behaviors, the way we interact, the way we accept other people. They arise from cleavages in generation, in socioeconomic class, in ability and disability, political, religious, language, and gender affiliations. But what I see and what I really believe is that after the war ended in Bosnia in 1995, an understanding of cultural value was not made a priority. It gives us a place where we can make meaning and enact our identities. But more importantly, in post-conflict societies, culture gives us a place where we can develop meaning and identity. Culture is always changing and it's flexible. It's shaped and influenced by our environment and by events. And I like to think that culture is like an iceberg. The largest part is submerged. And if we fail to acknowledge what we don't immediately see, culture can become very dangerous. Culture influences and is sometimes the start of wars and conflicts. And that's why it has to be taken equally as serious when we're addressing post-conflict societies and working for reconciliation. What happens when we don't do this is we see ethno-political identity-based violence. We see the rejection and ignorance towards other people's beliefs, their traditions, and their histories. And we see the deliberate attack of symbols of these people's identity in an attempt to efface who they are and destroy their culture. We saw this in World War II with 1930s book burnings and degenerate art. And we are seeing this even now today with the attacks that ISIS are doing on countless symbols of cultural heritage and identity in the Middle East. But if we can create platforms to candidly discuss people's differences, we can make these differences more accepted. This will limit the risk of cultural heritage being attacked. This will prioritize the restoration of heritage after conflict, and will facilitate more sustainable and resilient economies as well. The most important reason, however, that I really believe that culture is the best tool that we have in reconciliation and helping post-conflict countries recover, is it helps promote and encourage and teach communities to have empathy. Well, what tools do we have at our disposal to do this, and how can you in your everyday life do this in personal and professional fields? Everything that I try and do in my work, or one of the many things that I try and do, is I try and help realize this idea by creating a discussion and just a discussion. That's only the first step. But I do this by involving all the tools that I know how to use and the ones that always get people talking. These are photography, art, film, involving people with various abilities, using international events and platforms, and various media tools. This helps us bring different groups of people together to discuss perspectives of the issues that we are facing in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And that allows us to then slowly make room for more empathetic and understanding communities. In December, we unveiled a sculpture in the United Nations in Sarajevo, which was made out of 45 weapons that were handed over by citizens throughout the country. These weapons were handed over as part of one of the campaigns I work on, and that is Small Arms Light Weapons Registration, Awareness, and Collection Campaign. This works with the entire country to help the 750,000 illegally owned weapons to be handed over without sanctions or their fear of repercussions. We commissioned an artist who's very famous in Bosnia named Darko Šobat, who's on the left, to create a sculpture and a symbol out of these weapons. In January of this year, Bosnia and Herzegovina had her photos of landmines, victims, Bosnian citizens, military surplus, and small arms displayed in Central Asia. This gave people in Kyrgyzstan the unique opportunity to see what the consequences of war look like and how difficult it is to overcome them even 20 years later. It also showed people in Bosnia the importance of how they address these issues are, because conflict and war does not just happen to one country, but the lessons shared on the recovery and reconciliation processes are unique and can help others avoid conflict by showing the reality that lasts long after war's end. Culture is the anchor of stability. Understanding it is so valuable and so important because it is rooted in our most fundamental values, equality and respect. No matter how complex the consequences of war are, or how many shapes they come in, these values are fundamental and needed for real, successful reconciliation. And promoting a greater place for culture in our work is the best chance we have at allowing people to reconnect with identities, ensure respect between identities, and really keep peace.